two major lawsuits have been filed against the ATF to stop the pistol brace rule. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think the ATF needs to be abolished, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also want to thank everybody who's been watching the channel, who supports the channel, to everybody who's subscribed to the channel. Right now we are approaching 500,000 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. That's kind of been one of my goals, is to reach 500,000, and you guys have been absolutely crushing it. So thank you guys so much for all of your support. And for those of you who are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. That really does help the channel to grow. It signals to the algorithm that this type of information is important, and then they push it to more people. So regardless, thank you guys for all of your support. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the ATF's new rule on stabilizing braces, which they published on January 31st. The new rule on pistol braces makes it so that almost any pistol with a brace attached to it will now be considered to be an SBR and therefore subject to the NFA's restrictions. And just recently, two major lawsuits were filed by two large 2A organizations in conjunction with a variety of states. One was filed in the Southern District of Texas by Gun Owners of America, or GOA, which was joined by the state of Texas. So in the first lawsuit we'll be talking about, you have GOA along with the state of Texas teaming up to sue the ATF over this new pistol brace rule. Then you have 25 other states who have joined the Firearms Regulatory Accountability Coalition, or FRAC, along with SB Tactical, in a lawsuit that they filed in the Western Division of North Dakota. That lawsuit is also being funded by the NRA. However, the NRA did not join the case as a plaintiff. These are two big lawsuits with a combination of state support and also major 2A organizations who are now trying to stop what the ATF is doing with pistol braces. Now, all of these lawsuits are in direct response to the ATF's final rule on stabilizing braces. In the final rule, the ATF expanded the regulatory definition of a rifle so that most, if not all, pistols now will be considered to be an SBR if they have a brace attached to them. The ATF did this by modifying the regulatory definition of a rifle so that now the definition of a rifle will include the sentence, a weapon that is equipped with an accessory, component, or other rearward attachment, i.e. a stabilizing brace, that provides surface area that allows the weapon to be fired from the shoulder, provided other factors, which indicate that the weapon is designed, made, and intended to be fired from the shoulder. That is the major definition change, which has now caused millions of firearms to fall under the NFA's regulation of SBRs. These lawsuits are a direct challenge to that rule and also that language change. In the GOA lawsuit, GOA as an org, along with the state of Texas, are seeking for the final rule to be found invalid under multiple different theories. For example, they seek for it to be halted as a violation of the APA, a violation of the separation of powers, an unconstitutional tax, and a violation of due process because it is overly vague. In the lawsuit, it is alleged that the final rule on pistol braces violated the Administrative Procedures Act, and that even if it didn't, it is still a violation of the Second Amendment. First, in the APA section, GOA argues that the ATF did not follow the proper procedures for creating a new rule, since the final rule is so drastically different from the proposed rule which they put forward originally. In the proposed rule, the entire brace analysis was centered around the worksheet that we all saw, which was the worksheet 4999. However, in the final rule which they published, the ATF completely scrapped that worksheet 4999 and came up with a new and even vaguer test, which they are now using to consider when a pistol is in fact a rifle or an SBR. That type of drastic change is not proper under the APA, and that's the argument being made here in the lawsuit. Also importantly, in the APA section, you see the argument that Chevron deference should not be used to analyze this issue. Instead, at the very least, the Rule of Lendi should be used if a court finds that the term SBR is in fact vague or the term rifle is vague. If you're not aware of what Chevron deference refers to, Chevron deference is a term coined after a landmark case referring to the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions like the ATF is doing here. Generally, for an agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute must be rational or reasonable. In contrast to Chevron deference, the Rule of Lendi indicates that when dealing with a criminal statutory interpretation of an ambiguous term, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to the people not the enforcement agency like the ATF. This type of argument has already been validated by the Fifth Circuit en banc panel in the case called Cargill v. ATF. In that case, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel found that the ATF's interpretation that bump stocks were in fact machine guns was invalid because of this very concept. In this case, GOA argues that contrary to the ATF's position, criminal laws are for courts, not the government to construe. If Congress wishes to criminalize braced pistols, it can amend the NFA to do so. This preserves the separation of powers by ensuring that legislators, not executive officers, define crimes. But Congress has not done so, and ATF's sudden reversal violates the rule of lenity. So that was the GOA in Texas lawsuit. Now I want to turn to the Frack and the 25 other state lawsuit, which was filed in North Dakota. In this lawsuit, Frack and SB Tactical are joined by West Virginia, North Dakota, Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, Virginia, and Wyoming. They go on to argue that the rule is a final agency action that exceeds the ATF's statutory authority. The rule regulates pistols and other firearms equipped with stabilizing braces, even though the text, structure, and history and purpose of the NFA and GCA show that the statute does not regulate such weapons. The Frack lawsuit also hits on some of the other issues that the GOA lawsuit hit on, like the Rule of Lendi. This lawsuit states that, at minimum, the statutes and the rule are grievously ambiguous as applied to stabilizing braces, and thus the adjudications violate the Rule of Lendi. The adjudications are invalid because they interpret the NFA and GCA in a way that encompasses millions of weapons, undoubtedly in common use, and thus raises grave constitutional doubts under the Second Amendment. As you saw there, they also briefly hit on the Second Amendment and the common use arguments that we see pop up quite a bit in these types of lawsuits. In that section, you see them cite to the Bruin decision by the Supreme Court and also the Supreme Court's decision in Caetano v. Massachusetts, which found that 30,000 stun guns within the US made stun guns in common use for the purposes of the Second Amendment, and therefore they were items or arms protected by the text of the Second Amendment. That's important because here you have braced pistols, which are much more in the millions. Conservative estimates are 40 to 100 million, so clearly they are more in common use than even the stun guns, which the Supreme Court found were in common use in Caetano. This Frack lawsuit is a little bit more generic and all-encompassing in some of the arguments it makes, but they are still hitting on all the main points that the new rule on pistol braces does in fact violate the APA. It's an overreach of authority by the ATF that runs contrary to the text of the statute of the NFA, and then also that it violates the text and the protections of the Second Amendment. So that is what's currently going on with the ATF pistol brace rule. Two major lawsuits have now been filed by two organizations in combination with a variety of states. And now the goal of all these cases, of all these lawsuits, will be to try and get some sort of temporary relief, maybe a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction, to halt this new rule on pistol braces from going into effect before that 120-day deadline. So that is the goal right now of all these lawsuits. But of course, if we get any more information, if anything like that happens, I will let you all know. So if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.